So, right, so now we'll hand over to you, Angela, to do your talk. We're looking forward to it.
Thank you very much, Judith. It's great to be back. I think, was it Peter who was just saying it was 2017, the last time I was with you? And Olive tells me you've still been doing some meetings on Zoom, is that right? Which is very impressive, because I think you're the only group that I know who've been doing that. I think everyone else, or most other groups, have just shut down during COVID. And it was really lovely this week to be back to my first in-person. I haven't worked for 2 years. I haven't been doing any talks for 2 years because of COVID. And I was back on Monday doing my first one in Wigan to a ladies group, and it was just so nice to be able to see everyone again. And lovely to be doing my second talk post-COVID today. So it's really, really great to be back with you. I hope you don't mind if I just talk a little bit about myself first, for people who haven't heard me in the past. And then I'll move on to some of the stories I'm going to share with you. I'm going to share a couple of stories that you may have heard last time, but everything else will be different. And this time I thought I would do more historic newspaper stories. There's some really interesting ones that I think you'll enjoy. So I was a journalist for over 20 years, but I finished at the office about 8 years ago because I was struggling with childcare. I've got 2 children. I say children loosely because they're now 21 and 18, both at university, so it is an expensive time. But I was struggling with childcare because I was doing a very stressful job with very rigid deadlines. And my mother, bless her, was my chief child carer. I was working school hours and she would do the school run and the holidays for me. Until she very selfishly turned round and announced to me that she was going off to Wrightington to have her 3rd hip replacement. And as I said last time, she does not have 3 legs. She was having the 1st hip replaced, if you know what I mean. And it left me in the lurch for childcare. And I decided that I would take some time out and spend it with the children while they were young. Which was great until my husband heard about this, and he turned around and said to me, "Oh, you're going to be a lady of leisure, are you? So are you not going to find another job that will fit in around the school?" And I thought, you know, I love talking. All my friends, and certainly my husband, tells me how much I love talking. And I've got some fascinating tales to tell. I think I'll go out there and share them with members of the public. So 8 years later, here I still am doing my talks. This is my job now. And I get all over the county. I've done a couple of talks in Cumbria and in Yorkshire as well. I do go over the border. And it's going really, really well until COVID hit. And I have had no work or seen anyone for 2 years. So as I say, it's lovely to be back again. I hadn't been finished at the office for very long when I got a phone call from Edgehill University asking if I'd do some supply lecturing in print journalism. So I did that for quite a while, and then they asked if I would like to stay on and run the department, which with 2 small children at the time was more than I wanted to take on. So I finished at Edgehill and just really carried on running with my talks. I absolutely loved lecturing. I loved the young people, although I don't think they loved me, because in my first week there, I made them do a 2-hour workshop on where to put the apostrophe. And I think by the end of it, they wanted to tell me where to stick my apostrophe, no one cares about it anymore, and it really annoys me. You know, it can really change the meaning of a sentence, and I don't think it's me that just gets a bit little cross about it. I know other people do as well, but yes, at least those students now know where to put their apostrophe. So that was very, very satisfying. When I was at the newspaper, I had lots of different job roles. But my favourite by far was crime correspondent. It was so fascinating. And I got to see a side of life that I wouldn't normally have seen. I would go up in the police helicopter. I used to get sometimes a phone call at 3-4 a.m. when I was fast asleep saying, we're going on a dawn drugs raid. Would you like to come with us? So I'd throw on my clothes and drive off to Southport, and very soon after would be bashing someone's front door down, running up someone's stairs and finding a load of cannabis plants being watered. So it was really, really interesting. So I think my favourite role, I was news editor as well, but I do think my favourite role was that of crime correspondent, because it was a real privilege to be able to see things that I wouldn't normally have seen. So yeah, it was very, very interesting. My career, obviously you all know I worked for the Southport Visitor, and last time I was with you I brought a copy of the first edition. Oh, I don't know if anyone can tell me. I think last time I saw you I said I was going to get this repaired, and I still haven't. It's falling to bits, much like its owner. I need to get this repaired. Can anyone remember how old the Southport Visitor is? Anyone like to take a little guess?
110.
Out. I'm not very good at maths, but I can tell you that the first edition came out on May the 4th, 1844. So this paper is only 50 years younger than the town of Southport itself, and it's still going, which I think is fantastic. And I think last time I saw you, I also mentioned about some of the adverts on page 1, because there are shops on Lord Street. Some of the shops, you know, we've got a milliner, a fashionable boot and shoemaker, a dealer in fine teas and coffees, a corset maker. So I don't see many of those shops on Lord Street anymore. If you ever go into Southport, it's all changed, hasn't it? So that's certainly changed. But I did share with you last time something else that's changed. Is it used to list the names of some of the people visiting Southport and staying in the hotels and B&Bs. That's why it was called the Southport Visitor. It was for visitors to the resort. I'm saying visitor because the paper does spell it ER, which is the Old English spelling of the word visitor. And all this time later, all these years later, they've kept with the Old English spelling of the word visitor. And the editor a few years ago decided he would make a bit of an April Fool's joke and tell the whole public that they were changing the name to visitor, OR. And there was uproar, absolute uproar. So we're all a load of traditionalists at heart, aren't we, I think? But yet reporters had to stand on the platforms of Southport railway station, and as people got off the trains they would ask them, who are you, where are you visiting from, where are you staying, and with whom? And then all those details would go in the paper. And I think I said last time, I think there'd be a lot of Mr. and Mrs. Smiths in those columns now. I think a lot of people wouldn't be very happy to be asked those questions, would they? But very, very interesting stuff. And I gave a talk not long ago in Wigan, and a lady in her 70s, late 70s, came up to me and she said, oh, I love local newspapers, they're so useful. And I said, yes, they are for news and advertising. And she said, I'm not talking about that kind of stuff. And she went on to tell me that when she was a little girl, her granny always used to get the Wigan Observer for a penny. But Granny didn't have enough money to buy it herself. So it would be bought by her family for her, and she would read it, and then it would be passed around all the neighbours to be read. And then it would come back to Granny's house. And I said, well, why did it come back to Granny's house? And she said, because it was so useful, as I told you earlier. She said part of it would be used for cleaning the windows with some white vinegar. Part of it would be used for spills for lighting the fire. And I know about that because we have a fire here, and I scrunch it up into little balls before I put my kindling on and my coal. And I said, yes, very useful. And she said, and then the rest of it would be torn into strips and to put onto string, and then it would be taken down to that little building at the bottom of the garden. And she said it was very, very useful, I can tell you. And I was telling my daughter this story, and she said, oh, Mummy, we're so lucky that we're rich enough to afford Andrex. And I said, yes, but only when it's on offer. Only when it's on offer. I said, I won't subject you to newspaper. So I have to agree with that lady that local newspapers are very useful, although I prefer to think for news and advertising as well. And then I brought with me a copy of the Southport Visitor from 1970s. I think this is 1972. When it was a great big broadsheet, not so easy to read. And now it is back to a similar size to how it started out in 1844. So it's still going, which is fantastic. And here's a photograph of the offices. The Southport Visitor offices actually started off on Lord Street in Southport in a disused abattoir, which is now the very swanky Vincent Hotel. Do you know the Vincent Hotel, the 5-star hotel? It used to be a cinema as well. So that's where it actually started off, and then it spent really the rest of its life, or most of its life, on Tulka Street, where the back of Marks and Spencer's is, if you know where that is. And there's a photograph there of the, if you can see that, of the office on Tulka Street, with a lorry load of paper being delivered by Bowaters, the paper company, for the paper to be printed on. And each roll of paper contained 6 miles of paper. So there was a heck of a lot of paper there to be, and it had its own printing presses as well, the building. But of course it was all hot metal days there. So there were quite a lot of accidents, I believe, people getting burnt with the hot metal. So how times have changed, haven't they? Not always for the best, but certainly how they've changed. Now, just want to share a few old stories with you. And I think the best thing about local newspapers, certainly old local newspapers, is they paint such a fascinating picture of social history, of life at that time. And I could spend hours and hours at the library if I had the time. In fact, I must do that when I do next have some time, just going through all the microfilm that the paper was kept on. The stories are absolutely fascinating. And as I say, a real eye-opener for how people lived at that particular time. I've picked out some stories from the original paper, just to share with you, which really made me smile. And I think I perhaps shared this one with you once before, but it's so lovely. I just wanted to share it one last time. And this is an advert from 1894. And it's an advert for the Victoria Baths on the promenade at Southport. And the advert reads like this: Victoria Baths Promenade, Southport, finest in the kingdom. Open from 6 a.m. to 8:30 p.m. 6 magnificent seawater plunge baths. Private baths, brackets, sea or fresh water of every description, including hot air and vapor baths, luxurious Turkish and Russian baths with trained attendants. Well, don't they sound wonderful? Although those Russian baths would probably be in the process of being ripped out right now, wouldn't they? We all seem to be boycotting anything Russian at the moment, but don't they sound fantastic? And I think sometimes we make progress, don't we? And then we seem to go backwards, because I think they sound absolutely so much nicer than Splash World that we've got now in Southport, which is nothing like those, but a really lovely advert there, really, really interesting. Just talking about social history, there's something I just wanted to share with you from the old paper, a fashion article about bonnets, and it's absolutely incredible, really, how people got away with the things that they wrote. But here we go, on page 7. Straw bonnets are now worn by all classes. Never were they more in favour. Now, can you imagine saying in a fashion article now that something is now worn by all classes, even the working class? You know, it's incredible, isn't it? And then it goes on to describe the bonnets and what colour you should wear them in, and how your bonnet should be trimmed, and really, really interesting, but quite shocking, some of it, to read this. I think I might also shared with you this, I'm not sure, but births, marriage, and if you get a local paper and some national papers as well, you'll know that there is a births, marriages and deaths column. We call it BMDs in the trade, but my mother always called it the hatches, matches and dispatches column. And my mother makes me laugh. She's 87 now, and she'll be reading the Lancashire Post, and she'll say, "Oh, you know, you're getting old when you know everybody in the dispatches column." And she does know a lot of people in the dispatches column now. And I'm certainly, at my age, I'm starting to know more people, see more dispatches announcements than birth announcements that I know. But there's a little hatch announcement in this paper of 1844 that I wanted to share with you. And it says, on April the 21st, to Mr. Lee, wife of Mr. Robert Lee of Preston, the claimant on the Lee peerage and estates, a fine boy, her 24th child. Isn't that amazing? 24th child. Now, of course, those children wouldn't have all survived, would they? But that poor woman, she must have almost been permanently pregnant. 24 children. It's absolutely incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible. To think how she must have cared for them all. I suppose the older ones would have helped to bring the younger ones up. But you just don't hear of anyone having that many children anymore, because, well, I suppose now we've got the TV, haven't we, gentlemen? So thank goodness for that. But going from births, well, to another birth I'd like to share with you as well. I hope I didn't share this one last time, I can't remember. this is a really fascinating birth story that went in the paper, that was picked up by one of the local reporters. When I was crime correspondent, it was my job every morning to go and see the CID and the uniform police, and they would tell me what had happened the previous 24 hours in the town, and I would follow a penny stories. And I'm assuming this story was picked up by the local reporter from one of the local bobbies. And it was about a maid who lived in Skelmersdale, but worked at a house in Southport. And this is how the story appeared in the paper in January 1894. On Wednesday morning, a young woman whose parents reside at Skelmersdale, but who has been in service at a house in Manchester Road, Southport, complained of feeling unwell and told her mistress that she thought she had better go home. About 8:00 p.m, she left Manchester Road for this purpose, but on her way to the station in Chapel Street, she was suddenly taken ill in Hill Street. About 8:30 p.m, she was seen by Police Constable Connard lying on the flags in a prostrate condition. The constable at once ran for Dr. Baildon, who lost no time in his attendance on the young woman. At his arrival, it was found that she had given birth to a healthy female child. He and Sergeant Rimmer, a member of the St. John Ambulance Corps, did all that was necessary, and then she was conveyed on the police ambulance to the tramp ward at Birkdale. Mother and child are now doing well. Wow, I wonder if they ever did do well. That poor maid, to have not known she was pregnant and to have given birth on a cold pavement on a January day in the middle of Southport and then ending up on a tramp ward. It's really quite something, isn't it? I'd be actually fascinated to find out what happened to her and that little baby girl. But what a story, absolutely incredible. Another story I wanted to share with you is this one from 1844. The gentleman will absolutely love this story. Let's find it, page 6. The ladies may be a little incensed by it. I suppose the modern equivalent of this would be a bit of a Donald Trump sort of character, a bit misogynistic. But this story was written, it's a comment piece, and it was written by the editor in 1844, who I assumed was a man. I can't imagine there would be a female editor in 1844. And it was a leader piece, so it was a comment piece, and he was inviting readers to write in with their views of his comments. And his article is called Hints on Matrimony. This is his little comment piece, and this is what he says. No woman will be likely to dispute us when we assert that marriage is her destiny. A man may possibly fill up some sort of an existence without loving, but a woman with nothing to love, cherish, care for, and minister to is an anomaly in the universe, an existence without an object. It is as natural for a woman to have someone to cling to for protection, someone to look up to for advice and assistance as to breathe. Without it, no woman ever was or can be happy. It is the want of her nature, and nothing can satisfy her heart with such a void unfilled. Now, he rambles on a lot more, and then he goes on to say, girls should know that men superior to themselves in education and position do not always associate with them for any good. And men should know that by marrying girls educated in habits of life above their fortunes, they are not likely to have good wives. A little sound sense will enable any man to see that it is better to have a wife grateful for more than she expected than grumbling at less. Married men can also earn more money than single men and spend less. For the comparative happiness of married and single life, we appeal for the experiences of those who have tried both, for the observation of the unmarried. Well, well, ladies, what do we think about that? That is our destiny. That is, and we have no life with that void unfilled. Men, we love you, but really, you know, we do have other things, don't we? But it sounds really quite outrageous, doesn't it? But of course, in those days, that was how life was. You know, that was a woman's destiny. Her destiny was not to be.
Oh, we're frozen. Oh.
Sadly, a lot of inquests as well, which are really, really very, very unpleasant and upsetting things to have to cover. But there are a couple of inquests from 1844 that I also wanted to share with you that just were so fascinating. There's one here, and it's called A Sudden Death. It says, yesterday, Friday, an inquest was held at Mr. Holfrey's at the Bold Arms Hotel in Southport, because that's where they used to hold the inquests. And it was held before Henry Hayes Esquire and a respectable jury, touching the death of John Watson, a pensioner in the 2nd Dragoon Guards. The evidence given by Joseph Latan, the ostler at the Bold Arms, was to the effect that the deceased had been working the day before. He retired to bed at 9 p.m. in a state of intoxication and was found dead the following morning. Verdict: that he died by the visitation of God. Now, isn't that incredible? Of course, now, you know, our verdicts now are suicide, accidental death, but this verdict was that he died by the visitation of God. He'd been visited by God and taken. Isn't that incredible? How things have changed, our language and the way that we've seen things. It's so different, isn't it, from 1844. I'm going to find another one as well that I spotted. Here we go. Let's have a look at this one from 1844. Now, this is a suicide by a very determined suicide has just occurred. William Duniscliffe, a butcher, put an end to his existence by cutting his own throat, whilst in a state of despondency brought on by excessive drinking. It appears that he had been robbed of between £6 and £7 by 2 women of the town on the previous Saturday evening during a fit of drunkenness. On the following day, Sunday, he remained in bed and told his wife that he would never go to that shambles again. During Monday, in the absence of his wife at the shambles, he committed the fatal deed. On the Wednesday morning, an inquest was held on the body, when the jury returned a verdict of temporary insanity. So there's another verdict that we never hear of. And just one more, an attempted suicide here The headline is "The Awful Effects of Passion." A young woman, 16 years of age, belonging to this town, on Friday last, while in a violent paroxysm of rage, swallowed nearly a common teacupful of laudanum, while with intent of committing suicide. Dr. Horn of this town, being called to see her, promptly attended, and by his remedies and unremitting attention, we are glad to hear she has recovered from the awful effects of poison. So a happy ending to that one. That poor 16-year-old girl, as I say, it was called The Awful Effects of Passion. So she'd clearly been jilted by her boyfriend and tried to take her own life. Do you know, these are very common stories, aren't they? You know, we still hear these sad stories, obviously reported very, very differently, but very, very common stories. Something else I wanted to share with you was this one. Oh gosh, this is really, really sad. I'm sorry, we'll move on to some happier stories very, very soon. A baby farming case. Now, we know that there have been some really, really sad cases recently of child neglect, really, really tragic. And unfortunately, you know, these cases, you know, that they're old stories, aren't they? You know, they happened many, many years ago as well. It's not something that we're not unfamiliar with. So I'm going to share a story of a really sad story of child neglect. And again, they didn't get very, very many, very long in jail, like a lot of the cases that we see now, which incenses people. Right, so I'll find this one, page 6. So baby farming case, actually it's not on there. Right, I'll come back to that one. I can't find that one at the moment. I'll come back to that one. We'll go, oh, here we go, I've got it here. So this is a court case. Two people, husband and wife and another woman, who were brought up, their labourers, brought up for trial on the charge of having, on November the 16th last year, caused the death of May Oldfield and causing the death of Ravina Oldfield, both being the illegitimate offspring of this particular couple. And absolutely horrific details talking about the neglect that they suffered, these two children suffered, and how they were starved. And at the post-mortem, it was discovered that Ravina weighed only 11 pounds 1 ounce, and the usual weight for a child of this age was 22 pounds. May weighed 19.5 pounds, where the ordinary weight of a child at 3 years of age was about 30 pounds. Following the witness statements, the mother said, "I am not guilty in causing the death of my two children. The food I got for them, they would not take. I got a drop of beer and that made it worse." The jury returned a verdict to the effect that William and Elizabeth Pearson were guilty of manslaughter and were sentenced to 7 years penal servitude. Isn't that so sad? But how strange, you know, I tried giving them beer and that made them worse. It's just something that we wouldn't consider doing now, you know, but, you know, these cases, we've seen them recently, and that was in 1890. And unfortunately, some things don't change, do they? Just moving on to something a little lighter now. As I say, I was a crime reporter for many years. And when I reported crimes, obviously there was a very specific way of reporting crimes. Obviously, we can't make any comments or put any emotion into that. It's a very rigid way that we report crimes. And if we were reporting an accident between two cars, we would have to say they were in collision with each other rather than one collided with another, so that we don't apportion blame to someone. But this story really made me smile. This is about an accident. This is about a boat that sailed into Southport Pier, and there are absolutely no prizes for guessing how the reporter felt and who he thought was to blame in this particular accident. And this is July the 26th, 1872. And it starts on Monday evening. The steamer Ark of Safety, in endeavouring to go to her moorings in the channel from the beach, was permitted by the grossest piece of blundering on the part of those in charge of her to drift helplessly broadside athwart the south side of the pier, carrying away 2 of the outside columns in the process. For a steamer in the sea to be allowed to drift like a helpless log of wood is a piece of seamanship we have never heard of. And the captain, we are told, made not the slightest effort to try to avert the disaster. With commendable promptness, measures have now been taken to replace the broken columns, and probably £100 will cover the whole mischief done. Now, isn't that amazing, the way that's reported? That reporter was not happy about the captain of that boat, was he? We certainly wouldn't be allowed to report anything like that now in that particular manner. But that really did make me smile. Something else that made me smile was this story. I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember what a workhouse was. My parents live a couple of doors away from a converted workhouse. Not many windows in there. It looks like a great big old barn conversion, really. And there's a story here. The headline is "Parrots at Workhouses," as in the birds. And it says it's about a meeting of the bosses of the workhouse, and they were trying to decide whether to put pictures on the walls. And it says, on Wednesday at the meeting of the Board of Guardians, Mr. Joseph Newbold proposed that it should be a recommendation to the Workhouse Committee to provide parrots for the use of imbecile inmates of the workhouse. He considered it much better than placing pictures on the walls for their amusement. The motion was carried. So no pictures, but parrots in the workhouse. And I think that was a wise decision, actually. I think parrots would be far more interesting, especially if you can teach them the odd naughty word or two. I think that would be quite good fun rather than pictures. But, you know, the use of the word imbecile, an imbecile inmate, you know, we just wouldn't use these words anymore, would we? You know, we'll say inmates, but we wouldn't use the word imbecile. Language has really changed, hasn't it? It's really absolutely fascinating. Now, I'm sorry that I've shared 1 or 2 rather serious stories with you today, but I hope it's given you a little insight of life in Southport in the late 1800s. I'm going to end with a funny story now, which I may have shared last time, and I apologise if some of you have heard it before. And this headline is "Hockey Dress Shocks Bus Conductor." Subheadline: Women Players Reported by Youth. And this was a story of some ladies or some girls who were coming over from Middlesbrough to Southport to play in a hockey match. And they were getting on a bus in Southport. And this is how it reads. This is from December 1929. The costumes of members of the Martin near Middlesbrough Ladies Hockey Club shocked the 17-year-old conductor of the bus they had boarded on their way to a match. "Pull your coat over your knees, it's indecent," he declared, and he threatened to turn them off the bus. He had seen little girls in short skirts, but it was wrong of women of their years to be so dressed. The Middlesbrough Chief of Police, Mr. Henry Riches, who was interviewed on the subject, said that he might draw the line at bathing costumes, but "I rather approve of the hockey tunic." Now, isn't that incredible? And that was reported as a crime by that 17-year-old bus conductor, that these girls or these young women were wearing short skirts on public transport. Now, they couldn't have been terribly old. I mean, for goodness sake, they were still playing hockey. Perhaps they were in their late 20s. But to be reported, for that to be reported as a crime of indecency, I wonder what they would think nowadays, some of the crimes of indecency that are reported in the paper nowadays. It's very different, isn't it? But I find it incredible, a 17-year-old male to be taking exception to a short skirt. I think most 17-year-old bus conductors nowadays would be very happy to see short skirts coming onto a bus. In fact, you wouldn't find a bus conductor anymore, would you? I don't think they exist anymore. So how times have changed, sometimes for the better, but a lot of times certainly not for the better. But that certainly made me giggle when I read that story, that had been logged as a crime of indecency. I honestly don't know what that bus conductor would make of a lot of women now at 40s and 50s. We're still wearing short skirts. Shock horror, but there we go. Times have changed. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my talk this afternoon. Thank you for sitting so well. We've had no interruptions, have we? We've had no phones going off, no delivery men at the doors, DPD deliveries, no dogs barking. I think we've done really, really well. So thank you very, very much for listening to me. I think I've done okay for time, haven't I? I think I'm maybe 2 minutes over, so I've done okay there. I was always good with the deadline, so I've stuck to my deadline. And thank you. It's been absolutely lovely seeing you all again, and I hope that maybe when I've written another talk, that was my third talk you've had today. So hopefully, if I get round to writing another one, I very much hope that Olive will invite me back, and I can share some more stories with you. So thank you very much, and I will stay with you while you get on with the rest of the business. Thank you.
Oh. Well, thank you very much, Angela. For one who's been an anomaly in the universe for nearly 73 years now and managed to survive it, you know, I did find that absolutely fascinating. I'm glad that you're a fan of the apostrophe, because I find on Facebook that these days, if you think spelling and punctuation is important, you're criticised by the grammar police and even accused of being OCD because you think that that's important. Yes. I'm glad you've explained about the Southport Visitor and the spelling, because I used to go to Southport once a year and I used to park on that pay and display car park opposite the newspaper office. And I used to think, I'm sure Visitor isn't spelt like that. But, so I'm glad that you explained. I thought they were really fast. I think the demise of the local newspaper is one of the sad features of our modern society. I come from the Accrington area, and we have the Accrington Observer, which is now part of the Manchester Evening News Group. But for decades, it was run by the Crossley family, Richard Shaw Crossley, and it was a real family and local newspaper. And sadly, that's not the case anymore now. In fact, if you get a newspaper at all now, even a national one, you know, anybody under 40 thinks you're something out of the ark if you get your news from the paper now. But I really do think that local newspapers are still important. But as you say, that the changes in society and the attitudes, it's just absolutely mind-blowing, isn't it, when you think. And as for the ship coming up to the pier at Southport, I didn't think the sea ever came anywhere near the pier, quite honestly.
Not
anyway,
very often.
Perhaps that's changed as well. So I would really like to thank you, Angela. I don't know whether anybody else wants to make any comments or ask any questions.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I would like to ask you one question, Angela, if
Yes,
you don't mind.
Peter.
As someone who does love doing interviews myself, what is the most rewarding interview you've ever done, and what is the most, well, I wish I hadn't done that interview?
I think perhaps, it's so difficult, isn't it? The most rewarding. Gosh, I've never been asked that question, Peter. That's a good one. I think perhaps the one that comes into my mind was when I interviewed Roy Castle, the late Roy Castle. You know, all know who Roy Castle was. And I interviewed him at St George's Hall in Liverpool when he was on the night that he launched the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Cause for Hope appeal, now called the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation. You see the charity shops around, and you know the charity. And I interviewed him, and he was already seriously ill on that night. He'd had all the treatment and it wasn't working. And he got on the stage of St George's Hall and he played the trumpet, and he put his absolute heart into launching that charity that was going to benefit so many people. So I interviewed him, and we did a big full page feature in the Southport Visitor about this new charity that he was launching, and that how people from Southport would be able, because it was a centre that he was opening in Liverpool on Merseyside, and that they would be able to use this centre for lung cancer patients. And as a result, and I put that, donations, if anyone wanted to make donations, they were welcome to send them to the paper, because this was before the days of Just Giving and things like that. And I had so many checks in, financial donations from people as a result of that article, who read that article and that they wanted to donate to the charity. And I was so, a few people, a couple of ladies had written, sent a check in memory of their husbands who they'd lost through lung cancer. And that was so lovely to know that that interview I'd done and that feature had helped to raise money for this brand new charity. So I think they're probably the most rewarding interviews I've done, when that one in particular, where we raised quite a lot of money for that new charity. So I would say that was really, really rewarding. And an interview that I should have done and that I didn't was interviewing the Spice Girls at Preston. They did a live concert and party in the park in Preston, and they were very new, and I met them. And the PR lady said, would you like to interview them afterwards? And I listened to them singing, and I thought, they're never going to be famous. I thought, they're terrible live. They can't sing for toffee. I'm not going to waste my time. Boy, do I regret not interviewing the Spice Girls. Because about 2 weeks later, they were #1 in the charts. So,
it's a bit like the chap who refused to manage the Beatles, isn't it?
Oh,
yes. One of those big life regrets. So,
thank you very much for those answers. Very interesting. Yeah.
You're very welcome, Peter. Thank you.
Right, thanks. So we're now on to the results of the 2022 competition. So that's over to you, Olive, is it now?
It is, yes.
Yes.
I do have my paper here. Sorry, stuck together. Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you very much to all of those members present who did actually respond to the call for more entries for the competitions. We did have 63 eventually. Now that was 12 less than last year, but it was still a reasonable number. So thank you very much. Only one had to be disqualified. The Batty Cup, any free verse poem in standard English, not exceeding 100 lines. The adjudicator this time was our own David Lithgow, a very talented member and talented poet. And he had 15 entries in the Batty Cup. On the Verdant Banks of the Ribble by Peter Foster is first. Now, Peter is one of our new members. He's only been with us probably about, well, just less than 12 months, I would think. He also delivers my prescriptions, and I've been pushing him for months to try and get him to join. Second, Chromosomes by Frank Gibson, who of course is here with us today. And
well done.
Has recently rejoined LAA. Third, Remnants of War, also by Frank Gibson. So congratulations to those people. And then we come on to the Pomfret Cup. This is any rhyming verse poem in standard English, not exceeding 100 lines. And again, David very kindly adjudicated for us. There were 14 entries. First, Fleetwood by Frank Gibson. Second, The River Ribble by Frank Gibson. And third, Are We Free by Peter Jones. So again, congratulations to all.
Very good.
By this time, I'm sure Frank's quite glad that he joined us and entered the competitions. The first contact he made with me was, Olive, if I join now, is there time for me to enter the competitions? And I said, yes, as long as I get your entries by midnight on the 31st of January. And I did. So well done to Peter and Frank. The Brown Cup, any piece of prose in standard English, not exceeding 1,000 words. Now, the adjudicator for this was Sheila Clift. She has adjudicated for us on many occasions. There were 11 entries, and the winner was Red Wing by Sarah Robin. Now, Sarah is also a new member. She hasn't been with us that long, and she was very keen to enter the competitions. I think she sent in 3 entries for each competition. So it really bumped up the numbers. First, Red Wing by Sarah Robin. Second, Friends in Life and Death by Olive Riley. Third, A Resilient Breed by James Lancaster. So well done to those people. Sorry, Sarah couldn't be with us today.
Well done, Olive. Well done, Olive. I'll say that for you. Well done, James.
There were also some commended ones. Green Wedding Dress in the Sideboard Cupboard by Sally Williams James. Rising from the Past by Frank Gibson. So well done to those whose items were actually commended. William Barron Cup, flash fiction short story in standard English, not exceeding 500 words. And the adjudicator, of course, is with us today. It was Angela Danby. And there were 11 entries. The Pier was first by Sarah Robin. The second, A Woodland Adventure by Sarah Robin. Third, The Steam Locomotive by Sarah Robin.
Oh.
Now, this was actually incredible because I mean, when Angela gets them, she doesn't know whose they are. They all just have a number, a letter and a number. And so obviously that style of writing really impressed Angela. So I'm sure Sarah is going to be delighted.
I bet she's glad she joined, eh?
Yes. There are also some commended because Angela.
Are they all by Sarah Robin, Olive?
Yes. Yes. The other the commended ones, Angela felt that there were quite a lot of entries in this 11 that were really of a high standard, and so
it was really hard work actually trying to pick those three, because there was they were very good. There's some really high, really high caliber entries.
That's right. So the commended ones: Playing Up by Dan Forrester, A Postcard Home by Carol Talbot, Much Too Late by Peter Jones, and Exposed by Frank Gibson. So congratulations to those people, and I think they're all here. So we can give them a round of applause because they're all here. And last but not least, the Mercer Cup, a short story in standard English, not exceeding 1,500 words. The adjudicator for this was Cynthia Kitchen. Now, she was a new adjudicator last year and agreed to do the adjudication of this competition this year. She didn't do the same one last year. There were 12 entries. First, The Voices in My Father's Study by Sarah Robin. Second, Seal of Approval by Sally Williams-James. Third, Shopaholic by Dee Parkin. Commended, Metamorphosis by Sarah Robin. So, I'm so sorry that Sarah couldn't be here, but congratulations to all of those people who took the time to actually enter the competitions and have obviously been placed or commended. So congratulations to all of you. Thank you.
Well done.
Yes. Congratulations to all, and to those who did the adjudicating. That must have been a very difficult job. So we're coming to the time of the comfort break now. I think we've got to 5 minutes ahead of schedule now, but anyway, we may as well break now for 10 minutes if you want to get yourselves a cup of tea or whatever, and then we'll reassemble at 3:10, if that's okay. Thank you.
If you haven't already brought something with you that you might like to read afterwards, well, you could always find something in the 10 minutes.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Never give up. Right.
Oh, I'm being recorded, am I?
Only just.
Well, I'm with Olive. We hope we can make a difference in the university at Bolton.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So we've got some people now who are going to read some of the work, have we? Is there an order of performance, Olive?
I did send the list to Jill, but if she, in case I couldn't get on.
Right. Sorry. Yes, I was looking whether I had a list, but I couldn't see it. But I've probably got lost among other things.
I sent it to Jill. Hold on. Here we are. I found it, but I say I don't know if Jill wanted to go ahead. I had put Frank to kick off.
Well,
Frank was number one, but I knew he'd done so well in the competitions. I thought he could read for us.
Frank, you need to unmute.
I'll just unmute myself. Yeah,
Yeah, right, good.
I was going to read a standard English poem, but after the last few minutes, we're definitely in dialect. It's my take on our Shelley's Gita chat. It's called Daisy May. Households were in panic because our darling Daisy May, who is curating with the curate, said, "I'll bring him one for tea." Me mother and me father had words I do not jest. Mother said he'd wear his shirt to cover up his vest. China cups were borrowed from up and down the street, and teapot from Labour Club made set look all complete. Tablecloth were washed and starched, corners ironed into pleats, and our kids would get a slap to keep us out of seat. Cakes were baked, bit neighbours, party fingers filled with ham. Grandma made a great big sponge, topped up with cream and jam. Step was stoned in earnest, and Knocker polished bright. I'm sure it would have sparkled in darkest, wettest night. All preparations finished, Mum could only sit and wait. But as clock kept ticking round and round, and knew her Daisy May were late. At last, I heard her footsteps, heels clicking like a toff. Then I landed on her own. I said I'd called it off. All straight, then had a party to celebrate that day that the curate of this parish didn't come and have a stay.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love Lancashire stuff like that. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Oh, it's got to be fun, hasn't it? You know what I mean?
Oh, so clever.
So who's got Olive's muted, I think. Olive, are you speaking? You're muted.
We can't hear you, Olive.
Sorry, I did click the unmute and nothing happened. Right, Carol, it's Carol next. Carol Talbot. There you are. Carol, you'll need to be unmuted.
I'm trying to, yes, I'm unmuted. Okay, yeah. Oh, mine has a Lancashire theme as well. This is part of a novel that I'm attempting to write. So there's two little pieces in it. The first one's quite sad, hopefully the less. So this is set in Oldham, late 1850s. I was inspired by an article in an old paper, Angela. I think it was probably about 1861 or something, about this woman who died, which was inside the article. So this is a cellar dwelling in Oldham. Moses took some rousing. John could smell alcohol, and suppose the old man had been drinking heavily the night before. The cellar had little comfort. The straw-filled mattress in the corner had only 2 blankets, and 2 rustic chairs stood either side of an empty grate. Under the window was a bench with rusty tools that Moses used to sharpen knives to earn a little money. It was cold, damp, and unwelcoming. No wonder he went to the inn where there was warmth and comfort. "What is it, our John?" Bemused Moses sat up and looked around for his wife. "Lily? She must have gone out, but I don't know where. Why should you go out without telling me?" Moses rubbed his eyes, stretched, held onto a small table and stood to greet his nephew. "Sit down, Uncle," John suggested, pointing to the chair by the fireplace. At the scar-lined face, scars that coal dust had turned blue during decades of back-breaking toil. John sat and Moses eased himself into the other chair. The old man's short-sighted eyes peered at John, then, sensing that this was not a social call, asked, "What's to do?" "Did you go to New Inn last night?" asked John. "Aye." "Went out for a jar? And Auntie came to bring you home?" "Remember seeing her there. Don't know where she is now. Must have gone out. She's at our house." "What's she doing there?" Moses held his aching head in his hands. John shifted around on the hard chair. "She had a fall and were brought to our house last night." "A fall?" Moses did his best to make sense of what John was telling him. "She's with our Martha, but..." John paused to take a deep breath. "Oh, you've suffered too much. What with losing your son and all." "What is it? Is she sick?" Moses grabbed John's shirt. "I don't like to tell you, but it's worse than that." "Worse? What do you mean?" His voice grew higher and louder. "I'm sorry, but she passed away last night." Moses's breath quickened. His eyes glazed and he began to shake. John worried he might have a stroke. He put a firm hand on the old man's lead shoulder and tried to make his voice sound reassuring. Calm this then. There's nothing you can do. I'll take you to see her. Our Betty's gone for Dr. McBride. Lily? Fall? She can't be dead. No, she can't. Moses sobbed. John let him cry, then helped him to stand and put on his jacket and cap. He looked around the room and made a mental note to bring coal before he took Moses back to his own home. The scene that greeted them was hauntingly calm. Lily had been moved to a bench where she laid peacefully, eyes closed with a thin sheet over the water, prepared the table with cups of tea and a jug of ale in case something stronger was required. Sitting in silence beside the bench, she rose when the men entered. You'll have a cup of tea and a bite to eat, won't you, Moses? Thanks, Mary, love. I don't think I can manage anything yet. He paused before he added, well, maybe a small glass of ale. Him waited for Dr. McBride in silence. The daughter, Betty, had intercepted Dr. Bride just before he set off for his morning rounds, so he made his call on the Mayall's house as his first, well, I'll try that one again. Betty, the daughter, had intercepted Dr. McBride just before he set off for his morning rounds, and so he'd made his call on the Mayall's house, the first of the day before, given the severity of what he'd been told. After pleasantries on being welcomed in by Martha, he knelt and felt Lily's pulse and pronounced her dead. What is she doing here? He asked as he reached into his case. Amos Knott brought her here from the New Inn. They'd both been drinking heavily and he was taking her home. He said he were carrying her when she fell off his back, and he called me to help her get her up. I said to leave her here till morning so she could sleep it off and sober up. A fall, eh? There'll need to be an inquest to find the cause of death. You may be called as witnesses. The doctor turned to Moses. Mr. Mayor, perhaps you could tell me something of what happened last night. I can't remember proper. Somebody must have brought me home. We'd all supped a jar or two, said Moses. The doctor said he would arrange to examine further. The cause verified. You can register the death. And rubbed his eyes and thanked the doctor, but he wasn't sure what for. Kettle's boiled. I'll make us a nice cup of tea, was all Martha could think of to say. So the actual inquest showed that she didn't die from the fall, even though somebody piggybacked her home. She died from the amount of alcohol she had in her stomach. They were both sozzled. Didn't feel the fall. Right. Gib face, and it's set at about the same time. Good morning, my bonny lass. Hector Weasley, the overlooker, bellowed into Jane's ear as he slung an arm round her shoulder. Startled from daydreaming, she pulled away, yelling that she was not his lass. Reet little madam you are with your fancy accent, his weedy voice rang in her ear. What was fancy about a Yorkshire accent? It's different. Understand all of the Lancashire dialect words. Weasley was only 26, but looked older because of his habitual stoop and receding hairline. He screwed up his beady eyes, smoothed his reddish-brown moustache, tilted his pinched nose in the air and turned away. Jane pulled her face behind his back and saw developing something to her. The noise was difficult to talk, so workers used coordinating mime and hand movements, not to communicate. Jane was still learning. Weasley smiled and turned back to Jane. Violet, how you were getting on? His bad breath made Jane move her head to the side so that she didn't notice the smirk on his face. Oh, that's nice. To reply, Weasley moved over one side of his face and showed her how to me more and answer. Violet smiled and copied the movements, but still her eyes blazed back at her. Jane was puzzled. For dinner break. Suddenly, the hood was snatched off her head and her hair was roughly pulled from behind. She turned round to see the girl who'd mimed at her. Who do you think you're calling gib face? It's you what's ugly, screamed Violet, her plump face contorted in anger. Get off me! Didn't know to saw it. All I said was, very well, thank you. You lying cow. Violet's clogs made contact with Jane's shins. That hurt! Jane prized Violet's strong fleshy fingers from her hair, then slapped her attacker. Violet yelled and pushed, but lost balance, and the girls landed in a heap on the floor in the mill yard. Jane was trying to wrestle out of Violet's grip when she heard Betty's voice. Stop it! Betty bent down and tried to separate the girls. She called me gib face, wailed Violet, pulling Jane's hair. That's enough, the pair of you senseless murs. We both by the arm and pulled them apart. Jane pointed. This, Weasley put his thumbs under his braces and doubled over laughing. Jane was tempted to kick him, but she needed the job. Weasley turned to Violet. I think she got it wrong. She's a daft one, that. No harm done, eh? He moved closer. Violet stepped back, her eyes blazing with anger. No harm done. I saw you. Her face burned. She turned on them and stomped to the far back of the mill yard, her ample bosom wobbling. You are causing mischief. Can't see what that Violet sees in him, any road. Right scallywag he is. Jane picked up her snood and pushed her hair into it. Her skirt was dusty, but at least the dirt was dry. Betty helped her to brush the worst of it off. She would have bruises on her arms and legs, but apart from that, she was unhurt. I never encouraged him. I believe you. He tries it on with all the lasses. That Violet's daft to think he likes her. He makes her pass at all girls. But what a trick, showing you how to sign give face. Betty began to giggle. I'm sorry, but as long as you're all right, I can't see the funny side of it. Jane couldn't help but smile at Betty's infectious laugh. I suppose you're right. At least I've learnt a new word, even though I can't remember how to sign it. Just as well, calling people ugly is not a good idea, chuckled Betty. Come on, I'm starving. Let's eat before Hooter goes. Jane smiled. Yeah, we'll leave Violet to the weed. The giggling friends went back to work.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, the sound was unfortunately breaking up a bit, Carol, but we got most of it anyway.
Oh, I think it's my internet. It keeps saying it, and other people's voices are breaking up. I think it's me.
Oh, we all have technical issues, I think, from time to time. Thank you anyway.
Well, thank you for listening.
I'm going to change the order and ask Sally if she'd like to read for us next, please. You'll have to unmute yourself, Sally.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, I mustn't have muted before then. Oh dear. This is about my grandma's mirror, which hangs in my living room now, and it's in dialect, and it's called A True Reflection. For 80 odd years it hung in front room, sin changes their echoes, both sun and moon. Observe gas lamps sad flicker in cold winter snow, and firelight lights crackling in warm evening glow. Saw me mum dancing in a shy, youthful way, and me gran as they knelt on peg rug to pray. Saw a firstborn get wed and become a new wife, heard sirens loud wail in wartime's hard strife. It survived 2 world wars, bet even a crack. It watched young lads leave women, men hobble back. And then there were me, just a poor striking babby. And then come me sister on a much welcome laddie. For 1/8 of a century, thou's been here in me house. Thou's seen me laughing and thou's heard me loud grace. Seen me doubters powdering sweet turned up noses. Seen both me sons posturing poses. Thou's seen grandchildren laughing, playing and screaming. Thou's seen young folk living and seen old folks a dying. But somehow or other, thou's escaped art smashing of ornaments flying and plates banging and crashing. Thou's seen all our lives in all its rich glory. Thou could tell some good tales of our family story. For although thou just seems an old-looking glass, thou witnessed aught lot, led in note past. Thou never failed to look straight in me and kept silent about all that thou'st seen. I'll still leave thee hanging o'er our fireplace, for I see a friend when we meet face to face.
Oh, it's lovely.
I hope you could understand it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's lovely.
Wrong corrects me spelling.
Yeah, we need to circulate these more, don't we? These Lancashire writings and that, and you know, bring people's attention. And I'm glad we have people among our own members who are already experts at that. So perhaps the rest of us could. I speak very broad Lancashire, but I've never tried writing it, you know. So perhaps that's yet another retirement hobby we think of taking up. Right. Who's next now?
Peter is next.
Peter, yeah.
I'll mute myself. I've just got 2 poems for you. They're quite short, and the ones I've wrote over 20 years ago, but I think they're still relevant today. So the first one's one I wrote about my grandson when he was born in 1995, actually. Called it Perfection. Until they make a camera that photographs the soul, the world will never start to see the beauty I behold. When I look deeply in your eyes, the wonder that I see, exclusively revealed to me, just sets my spirit free. I see a world that's loving, where violence is unknown, a world I briefly live in when we are on our own. There is no greed nor hunger in our private paradise, no room for evil thoughts and deeds, no calumny or vice. How wonderful the world would be if everyone could see the beauty born of innocence that you now show to me. I wish that innocence could last as I stand here beguiled and look into your perfect soul, my precious newborn child.
Oh, that's lovely. Oh.
So when
And
was
the
you
other
born?
one-
1995. So he must be what, in his late 20s now. Yeah.
Yeah, 20,
Yeah,
27,
27. Yeah.
Right. So the other one is a little bit, well, it's a humorous one, but it's about my ulcer, actually, because I've had an ulcer. I've had ulcers for years, but first time I was diagnosed, I wrote a poem about it. Ulcer, it's called, very original. They've taken x-rays and they've seen them growing in my duodenum. Signs of an ulcer lurking there, waiting for its chance to flare. If I should once step out of line and have that extra glass of wine, no class distinction as it grips between French fries and just plain chips. French fried eggs, sausages and bacon from now on must be forsaken. And I'm taking good advice, avoiding food containing spice. Also drinking beer and whiskey is now considered very risky. If the adjustments I can make, my ulcer, I'll eradicate. On the credit side, let's think what I'm allowed to eat and drink. For breakfast, cereal with milk, sugar down as smooth as silk. For dinner, such a savoury dish of boiled potatoes and poached fish. And I'm speechless when I see boiled eggs and soldiers for my tea. With these delights for me to eat, I'll find my diet hard to beat. If I stick with food that's bland, I should soon be feeling grand. And if I can control my whim for fatty food, I'll end up slim. And hope and pray with every breath, my ulcer will be bored to death.
There he goes.
So has it worked, all that treatment and diet then, Peter? Kept it in control anyway, yes. Good. Right. Have we got anybody else yet?
Yes, yes, next one. David.
Great.
I was torn between two, but since Angela, right. I wondered where I knew your name from. No, I remember because about 5 years ago you talked to Up Holland Provost Club.
Yes, I did, David.
You did,
Yeah.
yes. That's where I got your name from.
Yeah.
Well, since you don't like apostrophes, I don't like absolutely. So this poem is called Absolutely. And I wrote it about 20 years ago. So the title's Absolutely. Absolutely, I replied, quite forgetting that I could have answered yes. Absolutely's breed like rabbits, joining all those filthy habits, like infinitives that adverbs split aside. They're absolutely everywhere these days, these absolutely people with their absolutely ways. Absolutely, they're pathetic, using language that's arthritic, and they still expect a modicum of praise. Their diction leaves so much to be desired. Those people who forever leave you tied with their simple absolutely, that you analyze minutely when you know an adjective is still required. When the answer to a question is a single absolutely, then you wonder, is it absolutely what? And your senses will start to tingle as you contemplate the mind that is so impossibly with idiocy combined. They never answer no, and they seldom answer yes, for it's absolutely darling, and you have to make a guess. If you ask them, does it matter? In between their idle chatter, they say, darling, absolutely, more or less. Yes, it's darling, absolutely. When it wouldn't come amiss if they missed out absolutely, and they simply answered yes. Absolutely smears the country, absolutely stains the town. Oh, it's absolutely everywhere and absolutely gets me down. Now, alcohol and zero can be absolutely absolute. They both need the adjective as well, you know, but absolutely on its own, it isn't finished, do you mean no? So it's absolutely wrong to think it's so. Yes, it's absolutely, absolutely, absolutely true that the world of absolutely isn't absolutely new. It was there at the beginning, it was absolutely right, but the absolutely infidels have spread a verbal blight. This inconclusive adverbs scattered loosely through their chat, and they might as well, for all I know, be talking through their hat. We don't need a revolution to get rid of this pollution. I'll arrange to get a firing squad to shoot them in the head. And if that's not absolution, then at least it's retribution. And at least the absolutely's will be absolutely dead. Well, did you like it?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant.
David, that really needs to go onto the website on the members page, I think.
Well,
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
it's on there, it's in there.
Oh, yes, brilliant. Because even on television now, even when they're interviewing people, it's absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Before they even say, I mean, they don't need to say absolutely. Just stop talking.
Yeah, the other one is literally.
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
One I've noticed lately, I don't know if it's an Americanism, reach out to. I think it means contact. I reached out because I'm always seeing it on Facebook now. People say I reached out to, and I think, well, what do they mean? They mean they contacted somebody, you know. And I don't know where that. I think very often they are Americanisms, aren't they?
What about blatantly obvious when it should be patently obvious?
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, normally I don't include myself on these lists of poets or writers or whatever, but when I was inviting people to actually offer to read something today, one of them actually said, I can't read myself because I'm still croaky from COVID, but I'd like to hear you read something. So I thought, well, maybe I should. So I've just got a couple here. I mean, how I follow that, I don't know. I shan't attempt to. Obviously, during COVID, lots of people have been stressed, but I'm quite sure that looking back, there have been some very special moments, particularly when people have discovered the outdoors and sounds of birds and things they haven't heard for a long time, or maybe haven't heard before. And so this is just called Precious Moments. Precious moments, moments to treasure, memories of childhood, things and places, the smile of a loved one, a hug of forgiveness, time together, realization of love, vows made to each other, the cry of a life of a newborn, a first word, a first step, all precious moments, moments to treasure. And then I have another one. This is one I wrote very quickly before the end date for the competitions, because we needed something extra to make up the number. And it's not an original theme, but it made up the number. Love affair. She was elegant, her long body sleek, curvaceous, well upholstered. With her firm chassis and eye for colour, she stood out from the crowd. As soon as he saw her, his heart pounded in his chest and passion aroused his loins. She was so beautiful. He knew he must make her his own. He walked closer, taking in every detail, including the decorative badge she wore on her bonnet. After swift negotiations, he took her home. The lifelong love affair with his MGTD had begun. I'll just explain where that came from. On the wall in the sitting room, there's a painting of 3 cars. There's one of the first Ford Anglias. There's a little tiny Austin, one of those really old ones that had a pedal in the middle. And there's also an MGTD. And these 3 are placed very nicely in this frame. Brian used to look at them and tell people, those are my 3 loves. So of course I knew where I came in the pecking order. But that's what gave me the idea for that poem. So there we are.
But isn't there an advert now on the telly though, where the boy's mother's speaking and you think that she's talking about, you know, that she's met a new girlfriend, and then when it ends up, it's the car, you know, comes delivered to the front door. Yeah, that's right. So
Stroking and hugging it. That's right.
yeah, right.
Well, that's the last on the list, except of course we have our president. Who
yes, Sid, it's your turn for the closing dialect item.
Please, Olive.
Sorry?
Mark, do you want to sing? You had your guitar in your hand a few minutes ago.
But it was there. But no, if that's all right.
Oh no! Oh, Mark, yes, you can.
Yeah.
Sid will wait.
Oh, no, he will. First of all, I found the thing about newspapers fascinating because 20 odd years ago, I did my family tree. And to cut a long story short, I couldn't find any information about the death of my great-great-grandfather, who worked on the Great Western Railway. So come forward 20 years and the British newspaper archive is around, and I was doing some research for the house that grandparents lived in Appley Bridge near Wigan, and I thought, well, let's have a look at to see if I can find anything about Charles Dowding. I couldn't find anything about him, but I found an article about his wife, Dinah. She was up in court for an affray. This was in the Bristol Daily Post on August 16th, 1877, and I know that because it's right in front of me. It said, basically, it was the court reporter, and I won't bore you with the details, but she was arguing with a neighbour, and it says, Dinah Dowding of Patchway, the wife of the station master who eloped with another man's wife some time ago. So that's where he went to. So I've no idea. That's what happened to him anyway. So that was that. So the newspaper archives are very useful things.
Yeah, that's very good.
I need to keep looking to find out when he actually died. He wasn't in the 1871 census, but he was in the 1871 census. Anyway, this is it's not mine. It's Harvey Kershaw's Best at Bunch, and there's a word in here. We've been talking about Lancashire dialect words. Ranty Powell. Harry Boardman used to say Ranty Powell was a twisted pole. It's not actually. It's a seesaw. I'm sure some of you can verify that. Anyway, Best at Bunch by Harvey Kershaw. This world's just like a ranty pole, it's nought but ups and downs. I've found it mostly down, Miss N. I'm used to fortune's frowns. Our folk were all tired with same brush, they were either bad or wicked. I were only one as were any good, folk reckoned when they bickered. Me grandad stood on marketplace selling pigeons fine and sleek. When let loose, they'd go flying woman, he'd sell 'em again next week. Me granny were a fouse-out brid, who towed fortunes at a price. When folk had gone, who laughed and said they paid her to tell lies. And my Uncle Sam played big bassoon, but it didn't suit Aunt Jane, so he clouted him o'er the head with it. He get music on the brain. Uncle Eli were a card sharper, cards up his sleeves he had. One day they copped him at his tricks and trumped his ace for good. My father seldom were a one, his life were one long muddle. He'd get an fiddler's elbow bad, and were all as out of fuddle. And my mother had a rare complaint, they called it beg and borrow. From next door who'd catch Sunday joint, saying, I'll fetch you back tomorrow. And our Nathan were a reckless fool, allus yed o'er heels at debt. One night he did a moonlight flit, we haven't found him yet. Our Alice were a flighty piece, who were a buxom, hefty lass, who ran off with a married man, it thought who'd share his brass. And our Kester worked at glue factory, boiling glue to make and mend. Folk said when they fished him out at vat, he'd come to a sticky end. And our Sarah were a pickpocket, that's nought to shout about, you'd either find her going in jail or else just coming out. And our Billy were as cute and fous as a barrow full of apes, he shaved whiskers off his goose cogs, aye, and he'd sell 'em new as grapes. Hard work didn't seem to suit him though, he said it made him thin. First day he worked, he'd an accident, he sprained his wrist with clocking in. I could keep you here till cows come one telling of me family's woes, but that wouldn't alter things, I guess, 'cause they're all as black as crows. They all went downhill, as you've heard, they mun have been ill-bred. I were t' only one as were any good, at least that's what folks said. But although I reckon me best at bunch, I didn't take heed at warning, that's why I'm sitting in this cell. They're hanging me at morning. Right.
Very good.
Very good.
It worked a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, I think we've got to your turn now, Sid, for the closing rendition.
Have we got time? How long have I got?
Oh, don't make excuses. Yes, we've got time.
Anyway, this is almost seasonal. I have to put these glasses on because of age at writing. It's from the pen of William Billington in Blackburn, retired weaver and publican, and And it's a tale about the author. Bill is sitting in his little house and his mate calls round for a chat, but Bill isn't very well. So he says to his mate, tell you what, you talk and I'll just listen to you. And he said to him, if you want something to talk about, you can tell me, why does everybody call you Pancake John? So this, having just cleared Shrove Tuesday, is Out Pancake John. It is very deep in the Blackburn dialect of 1888, it says. Our cupboardy corner, yesternight, Arknit rabble rowling up street, if to patience with her din, when Pancake John come popping in. All right, says I, where have you been tramping? Not far, he said. I've come a camping, it's Pancake Tuesday, don't you know, and being country bred and oud like you. If you're not over busy with your rhymes, let's have a chat about out times. All right, says I. Says he, Owd, man, just tell me how they weren't getting on. They weren't feel chewed, but dash it, Bill, they weren't no but looking down right ill. Est of him poorly? There was, I'll bet. Aye, said I, and I'm sore yet. A rotten wheel gets a new spoke. They can mend machinery when it's broke, but they can't put new insides in folk. But if I have a guinea or a groat, if I've a full, a fur, or a empty pot, I'll take it as me luck, me lot. I grudge no one, I grumble not, for he that outs big balance straight is sure to deal out weight for weight and find some road to make things right. They're foos. Them as falls out with their fate because they have an empty plate. There's a lot that's poor and some that's ill. To rink right so, met blame theirself. The man's a chat. I'm ill, that says, but say they, John, I'm one of these as when unfit for a job theirself, I'll still out a leap for somebody else. So let's just see what you can do. And I'll say either aye or no. So wind up the clapper. Give it vent and rhetoric unto the heart's content. If thou wants a theme, I can give thee one. It's, why do they call thee Pancake John? That subject's known at wast. But let me have a pancake first, implored out John. I said, no, I'd make one, but I don't know how. He said, as he put me up to tips, and then both of us could grease our lips if I'd been good enough to land him pun and find him stuff, so as whether I knew how or not, he'd have a pancake. That he would. And so at it. That much more ado, I found him tattle, and he made two, and greatly good uns. And then his text, he handled just as follows next. In 1819, when I were a lad at Torna Green, there weren't a woman that I know from Goosehouse Folk to Fleetwood Hall, from Myerscough Smithy up to Sykes Wife Lum, but pancakes made. For all has come, and children, bless them, they come in throngs with their clattering clubs and prattling tongues, with their clean-checked brats and smiley faces. They were like merry men at fairs or races. So what were said or what were done, they took and they turned it into fun and scriked and danced. That Lord be with 'em, it fairly did you good to see 'em. They'd bother you, but they'd let you sup. But if yours weren't down, when next went up to midden, then they'd carry out and wipe your claim with a sooty flat. There's that like that in town to eat. But then that's up another street. I'll tell this tale about moralising, for nobody wants so much advising. Well, I'd been pancaking all long day. I'd called at every house up way. I'd eaten and eaten for everlasting. Our folk were feared to me badly brasted. Me man would rub it with swine's grease to ratchet and to give me ears. I'll never forget. I puffed and sweat and prayed that I might never be fat, because if fat folk suffered if as I did, the harder, or they couldn't bide it. Word spread that I were welly gone. What we ate in pancakes, one by one. Friends come to see me. Have a time rolled on and I come round. Stirred at anon. All my playmates plagued me. And it were then, bit mon, it were then as they christened me, Pancake John. Thank you.
Very good.
The epic poem from William Billington, and a group of poets in Blackburn who were under recognised because they got to live in the shadow of the Manchester lot. But we read one out in my reading group the other week, which might be of interest to Angela, because I've got the title of your next talk, because we found a Blackburn poem by a fellow called Jardine, James Jardine, I think, about a curling match that took place in Southport Glaciarium between the Blackburn Caledonian Club and the Southport team, I think. And apparently this Southport Glaciarium was a very short-lived enterprise. I don't know if you know anything about it. Apparently, it lasted for a while, but the chemicals that they use to keep the ice in midsummer produced this toxic fog, which made everybody ill, and it upset the members of the Blackburn Caledonian Club, especially the whiskey drinking Scotsmen, because it interfered with the taste buds, and they vowed that they'd never go there again. So if you want your next talk, get those old copies of the Southport Visitor out and find out what happened to the Southport Glaciarium. Curling in midsummer. It's there somewhere.
Wow, never knew
It must
that,
be in the
Sid.
Visitor.
When you
Never
find
knew
out, let
that,
us all
Sid.
know.
I will.
Yeah.
I'll do my homework.
Yeah. I wonder if it was like a skating rink as well, and just a venue for sort of ice sports like curling and hockey.
Yeah, it
Anyway,
was. Yeah, it was. It was a skating rink, but apparently it made everybody ill. And so
Never heard
more
of
than a
that.
few years.
Right.
The other thing you need to look for in your newspaper, Angela, is about the day that the two lions were seen in Lord Street. And one said to the other, "There's not many folk around for Bank Holiday Monday."
Very good.
For anyone who doesn't know, Frank, that's a sign that it's time to go.
Right. Well, it's time to come to an end, isn't it? So thank you everybody for your attendance and your participation, and thank you especially to Angela for giving your talk and revealing the fascinations of the Southport Visitor. So and thank you to Jill for facilitating the meeting via Zoom as usual. We have been meeting, Angela. We've met thanks to Jill's expertise, and Peter. Sometimes we've been able to have the remote meetings, and to some extent we've perhaps had some different people attending than perhaps might have attended some of the live ones, you know. But we have tried to get back to some live meetings, but one or two obstacles keep getting thrown in our way. So, but anyway, it's been good that we've been able to meet like this. So I always want to say, wish you all a safe journey home, and then I realise everybody's sitting in the living room. So anyway, enjoy your weekends, folks, and we'll
I've got to get downstairs, so it's probably just as well to do that.
Yeah. And our next meeting now will be the AGM, won't it, Olive, in June?
Yes, it will. And despite what came out in the newsletter recently, we have had to have another change to the AGM and the awards day. Yet again, Lytham has become an impossible venue for us. When we had booked and decided on the 25th of June, I then was told only about 2 weeks ago that it was Lytham Clubs Day on that day, which meant that the roads would be closed and there would be parades everywhere. And Peter very kindly got in touch with the organisers, who assured us that from 8:30 in the morning till 12:30, all the roads would be closed. It would be impossible to get to the assembly rooms. And our caterers also said that they wouldn't be able to deliver. So we had to make a quick decision, and the AGM Awards Day will now be held still on June the 25th, but it will be at St Mary's Parish Centre in Chorley. That's the one off Devonshire Road where we have been before. And I have secured hot pots. We've had them before and they were very good, from Marcus Moore, who is based, I think, in Chorley. And the good thing about him is that he does cater for as small a number as 12. I mean, obviously, we're hoping we're going to have more than that, but that is the situation. And obviously, that information will come out in the next newsletter.
Right. Thank you very much, Olive, for updating us. So we hope to see you all then. And in the meantime, keep safe and well, and enjoy your weekends, folks. So
Thanks.
bye.
Thank you, Judy. Good to see you
Bye.
again.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Angela, as well. Lovely.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Not bad, eh?